finally Europeans realize that Russia is a direct threat to their security and prosperity, and that's why the resolution or a resolution of this conflict with Russia will affect the security of the whole continent. And that's why now in Washington, they are protecting not just Ukraine, but their future as well.
Stephen, let's start by talking about what's going on today in the White House. That meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump, with a bunch of other people in attendance too. A number of European leaders, including Keir Starmer, are also in Washington to support the Ukrainian president because they want to stop Ukraine from being steamrolled into accepting Russian demands as the price of peace. It sort of feels a bit like Zelensky has brought along some backup after what happened last time, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it looks like he's going to need it, doesn't it? I mean, I was astonished just, a few days ago watching Trump looking so delighted to shake the hand of a mass murderer. It gives you the measure of the man, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's. They seemed very, very warm, But I guess he's delighted because it sort of feels like he's doing something. He's having a role. Do you think it's important? Speaking of having a role, do you think it's important today, Stephen, that Keir Starmer's going to be there, or is he just a spectator?
I think we have to do what we can. We know how militarily weak we are, and we know how weak our voice has become. And I don't believe that when the chips are down on things like this, either Trump or Putin will play it by nit of notice what we think. But Zelensky looks like a man who needs some friends, so I think we need to send him along.
Well, look, as we understand it, Vladimir Putin wants the entirety of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. The government minister Stephen Kinnock spoke to Times Radio Breakfast this morning.
There's different ways of looking at territorial integrity in terms of any negotiations that take place. There's potentially temporary recognition of changes, and then there's something more permanent and something that's recognised across the international community, and those two things are very different indeed, and it all depends on how the negotiations pan out.
Well, let's speak now once more to Alexander Khara, former advisor to the Foreign and Defence Ministries of Ukraine. Alexander, good morning.
Good morning, Hugh.
Thanks very much for being with us. Look, Donald Trump seems determined that Ukraine will have to give up territory to Russia as part of a peace deal. We'll come to the constitutional implications of that in a moment. But in terms of sort of public opinion, are Ukrainians beginning to accept that? Are they willing to accept that?
Well, first of all, there is no peace offer because the Americans are talking about ceasefire. So Putin wants us to compromise our constitution and territorial integrity and sovereignty for an illusory ceasefire, and after that, start talking about peace. If we're talking about Ukrainian general public, I have a poll of the prominent Ukrainian think tank back in beginning of the year. So it was 80% of Ukrainians are against of any territorial concessions in return for peace. And as I said, there is no offer of peace. There is an offer of a ceasefire. So that's why I don't think that Mr. Zelensky would agree on anything that would violate the constitution and then undermine his rule in Ukraine. You've seen with this corruption bodies demonstrations that of people that we are not happy that the Zelensky and his ruling party dismissed the anti-corruption bodies. So I suspect that there will be a real Maidan if there is such concession in return for nothing.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, look, Ukraine's constitution says any changes to the country's borders have to be approved by the public in a referendum. There was some talk last week that there could be some sort of agreed occupation, along the model of the West Bank between Israel and Palestine, that sort of Russia could control territory without Ukraine necessarily having to sacrifice it. Would that just be unpopular in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, de facto it is in place because we have a law on the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine by Russia. Because we need to have a legal framework how to deal with the people who are fled from those territories, how to interact or to have no interactions at all with those territories, and so on and so on. So we have a piece of legislation that regulates the status of the temporarily occupied territories, starting from Crimea to Donetsk, Lugansk, and other territories. But I don't think that it's in the cards for Ukraine. Once again, the core issues, the core differences between Russia and Ukraine, Russia and Europe are there, and they are not addressed by any political concessions or territorial concessions to Russia. They believe that this political regime in Russia, supported by majority, the lion's share of the Russian public, supports the war of conquest. They deny the very existence of Ukrainian nation and state, and that's why any concessions would not stop this war. Vice versa, they would encourage Russians to go further because it means that the aggression may pay off.
Yeah, but it sounds a bit like, Alexander, you're saying that you don't think any kind of sort of deal, even if it's just a ceasefire deal, is possible in the short term. Is that correct?
That's right. And actually, we've seen that Mr. Trump threatened Russia with this hell of a tariffs if Russia does not agree on the ceasefire. And actually, we've seen that Trump made a U-turn during this Alaska summit, and he was biting with Putin and actually siding with his positions that there should be a peace agreement with Ukraine, and certainly Ukraine should not just cede territory, but cede the ability to deter Russia in the future, which is a NATO membership, and certainly it's not an in the cards for Mr. Zelensky as well. We understand that given that Russia is a major nuclear power, much larger in many aspects than Ukraine, there is no chance for Ukraine to deter future Russian aggression if we are not a part of the collective defense structures like NATO, or if we do not have capabilities like nuclear missiles and nuclear warheads and missiles that may deter Russia in the future. So that's why we cannot agree on the ban on Ukraine's membership in NATO. In fact, back in 2014, when the Russians annexed Crimea and started war on Donbass, Ukraine was a non-bloc country. Majority of Ukrainians were against membership in NATO. It's just after the annexation, we put that in the constitution that we want to become members of the European Union and NATO. And it was Zelensky, after the full-fledged invasion, who applied for a membership in NATO. So NATO didn't play a role in this aggression. This neo-imperial revisionist vision of Russia that is playing the role.
Look, finally, Alexander, and this may seem unimportant, but it's important over here. We all worry in Europe that Europe hasn't given enough support to Ukraine. There's going to be those European leaders with Zelensky in the White House today, including Keir Starmer. How important is European support to Ukraine? What is the Ukrainian perspective on European support? Is there a feeling that it's been vital? Is there a feeling that it's not gone far enough?
Well, yeah, right. It's vital, and given that Mr. Trump doesn't want to provide Ukraine with any assistance, and actually we are running out of that assistance that was voted by the previous Congress and allowed by the previous president. So Europe is really important, and it's increasingly important for Ukraine. And what is good, and it's good that we have 7 leaders of European countries plus NATO Secretary General now in Washington. What is important? They are supporting us in our goals. But at the same time, finally, Europeans realize that Russia is a direct threat to their security and prosperity. And that's why the resolution or a resolution of this conflict with Russia will affect the security of the whole continent. And that's why now in Washington, they are protecting not just Ukraine, but their future as well.